peaceful September night in New Mexico was ripped apart in an instant. The sky turned black, the wind screamed, and suddenly, without warning, massive hailstones came crashing down from above. In seconds, cars were crushed and dented like tin cans, rooftops shredded, and entire streets buried under a frozen onslaught as if winter had violently invaded autumn. This wasn't the kind of storm anyone expected at the end of September. Families looking forward to calm evenings and golden sunsets instead faced a barrage of ice, each chunk the size of a golf ball pounding their homes and neighborhoods into chaos. From Albuquerque to Santa Fe and beyond, thousands of residents were blindsided, powerless against the storm's fury. The sound was deafening, like relentless gunfire hammering rooftops. For many, this wasn't just a storm. It was a terrifying reminder that nature is no longer predictable, and the seasons themselves are breaking their own rules. On September 28th and 29th, New Mexico was struck by one of the most punishing hailstorms the state has seen in years. What shocked residents wasn't only the destruction, it was the timing. Late September in the southwest is usually calm, dry skies, warm evenings, and a gentle slide into fall. But this year, the weather rewrote the script. A powerful cold front dropped across the state, colliding head-on with lingering summer heat. Over Albuquerque and Santa Fe, clear skies turned sinister in minutes, boiling into dark clouds that lit up with violent thunderclaps. The sound was like cannon fire echoing across the desert. Then came the hail chunks of ice measuring 1 to 2 inches across each one, slamming down with the force of a hammer blow. The storm showed no mercy. Parking lots turned into graveyards of dented cars, windshields exploded into shards, and rooftops gave way under the icy bombardment. In rural fields, crops and pastures were shredded left, looking as if heavy machinery had chewed through them. Residents described the moment as surreal. 1 second a quiet September night, the next a furious assault from the sky, a reminder that nature can turn familiar seasons into battlegrounds without warning. In Albuquerque, the storm struck with a violence few had ever witnessed. Residents described the hailstones slamming into rooftops and vehicles with a sound so loud it echoed like baseballs crashing against steel. Streets were soon carpeted with shattered glass, splintered shingles, and jagged chunks of ice that piled up like ghostly snowdrifts. Families huddled in basements as windows cracked and splintered. Others stood frozen at their doors, forced to watch helplessly as cars left outside were pummeled into ruined windshields, caved-in hoods, cratered, and bodies scarred beyond repair. 60 miles northeast, Santa Fe was caught in its own nightmare. The hail arrived on the back of fierce winds that ripped through the historic downtown. Towering trees snapped apart, their heavy branches crashing down onto cars and power lines. The city went dark in an instant. Entire blocks plunged into blackout as transformers exploded one after another. The mix of hail-howling wind and lightning flashes made Santa Fe feel like it was under siege. On the highways, panic played out in real time. Drivers abandoned the open roads, swerving under overpasses, cramming into parking garages, or pulling into deserted gas stations. Those trapped in the storm described it as a battlefield hail, hammering so violently against their cars that it drowned out their own voices inside. By the time the skies cleared, the aftermath was unmistakable: rooftops, punctured streets buried in debris, neighborhoods paralyzed. In late September, when New Mexicans expected calm skies, nature delivered chaos instead. Beyond the city limits, the storm's wrath tore directly into New Mexico's agricultural heartland. In small towns like Las Vegas and Ruidoso, farmers woke to fields that looked as though they had been ripped apart by a giant machine. Corn stalks that once stood tall in neat green rows were flattened, shredded into ribbons of leaves. Tomato plants lay bruised and broken, their fruit smashed into the mud, crushed by the relentless pounding of ice. What should have been the start of harvest season turned overnight into a season of heartbreak and loss. For families relying on small-scale farming, the blow was catastrophic. In just 10 minutes, we lost nearly half a year of labor, one farmer told reporters, clutching a handful of ruined corn kernels. Inside tin roof barns, the deafening rattle of hail-spooked livestock. Cattle bunched nervously in corners, chickens scattered blindly for cover, and ranchers later reported sudden drops in milk production as cows reeled from the shock of thunder-pounding hail and the sharp plunge in temperature. The storm also crippled rural roads. Country lanes iced over, sending pickups sliding into ditches. Power lines collapsed under the weight of fallen branches, leaving communities cut off and silent. With no electricity and no cell service, many farmers were left stranded, forced to rely on neighbors as they tried desperately to salvage what little remained of their crops. For these rural families, this hailstorm wasn't just another freak weather event, it was a crushing financial and emotional blow. From destroyed harvests to traumatized livestock, the devastation revealed how vulnerable the lifeline of New Mexico's rural economy is when nature turns violent without warning. For the people of New Mexico, this was no ordinary storm. It was a sudden, brutal test of survival. In Albuquerque, families were jolted from sleep as hailstones pounded rooftops with a roar like 1,000 drums. Within minutes, the streets were littered with dented cars, shattered windshields, and broken glass. The pounding was so intense that many residents froze in fear, unwilling to even step outside into the chaos. In Santa Fe, panic spread as parents rushed to gather their children. Trees snapped under the force of the winds, heavy branches tearing down power lines and plunging entire neighborhoods into darkness. With the city blacked out, residents relied on flashlights and the dim glow of cell phones to navigate through the storm. On highways, drivers swerved under overpasses and crammed into parking garages, desperate for shelter, as hail hammered their vehicles like artillery fire. The destruction reached deep into rural towns like Las Vegas and Ruidoso. Farmers watched helplessly as fields of corn, tomatoes, and other late-season crops were shredded in minutes. Ranchers reported terrified cattle clustering in corners of their pens while chickens scattered in all directions, shaken by the thunder and the sudden drop in temperature. Though officials later confirmed no lives were lost, hospitals filled quickly with the injured residents cut by flying glass, bruised by falling debris, or knocked down on icy roads. Dozens were treated for concussions, lacerations, and shock. Perhaps the harshest blow was psychological. Few expected a storm of this magnitude to strike so late in September. Weather alerts were limited, and many residents admitted they never saw it coming. What unfolded was a night of fear and confusion, a community caught unprepared, forced to face nature's fury with little warning and nowhere to hide. The devastation did not end with shattered windows and cratered cars. Across New Mexico, the storm's aftermath rippled through every layer of daily life, exposing cracks in the state's ability to withstand nature's fury. In Albuquerque, chaos erupted on the highways. Slick roads and near-zero visibility turned I-40 and I-25 into slow-moving parking lots. Dozens of fender benders were reported overnight as drivers skidded helplessly across hail-slick pavement. Police dispatchers were flooded with emergency calls while tow trucks worked non-stop to clear wreckage. At the Albuquerque, international sunport lightning strikes and fears of hail damage forced flight suspensions. On the ground, bus routes in Santa Fe and Las Cruces stalled drivers waiting nervously for roads to reopen. Even the rail lines faltered. Ice piled onto the tracks, forcing trains to grind to a halt until inspections cleared the way. In rural communities, fallen trees and downed power lines cut off neighborhoods, entirely stranding families as emergency crews struggled to carve a path through debris. But the storm's greatest impact was the questions it raised. New Mexico's infrastructure built for sun and sand, not ice and stone, buckled under pressure. Thin roofing materials shattered under hail the size of golf balls and, in some towns, baseballs. Insurance claims skyrocketed, leaving many families staring at repair bills their policies wouldn't cover. City leaders admitted what residents already knew: the system isn't ready. Local governments rushed to review building codes, state officials floated pleas for federal aid, and emergency communication networks came under fire. Too many people never got the warning or didn't know how to act when it came. This was more than a storm. It was a blunt reminder that New Mexico's future depends not just on recovery, but on resilience. And time is running out. As New Mexico begins the long process of recovery from this historic hailstorm, one truth is impossible to ignore. Extreme weather is no longer a far-off possibility. It's here, reshaping lives, communities, and futures in real time. The scars are everywhere, from skylights smashed to pieces to farmland beaten into ruin, and the road to recovery will take months, if not years. Yet, in the middle of destruction, something powerful emerged: the strength of neighbors standing together, proving that resilience is not just about rebuilding structures, but about the people who refuse to be broken. Now, it's your turn. Have you ever lived through a hailstorm or any extreme weather that changed the way you think about preparedness? What's one action every family in America should take to be ready when nature strikes without warning? If this story moved you, hit like, share it with friends, and make sure to subscribe. With your support, we can continue bringing you urgent, in-depth coverage of breaking weather events from across the globe, stories that matter, stories that prepare us, and stories that connect us all.